I'm sure the very notion of a Series X2 or PS5 Professional will make some people's blood boil. And yet, here I am, sitting in a pool, talking about the mid-gen refreshes. I'm not that naive. I know how the internet tends to respond when anybody brings up this topic. And honestly, I get it. The only reason anybody expects these boxes to get announced anytime soon is based on some fairly fickle historical precedent. The PS4 Pro came out 3 years after the original. It's been 2 years since the PS5 release, so let's do the math. Oh, I guess we're getting new consoles next year. But yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. You got the supply chain issues. There's a lot of people who still want these consoles that can't get their hands on them, even 2 years after launch. Most games today are still cross-gen. We've gotten very few next-gen exclusives. It just wouldn't make a ton of sense to give developers even more power to play with when we haven't seen any game take full advantage of these systems' capabilities. And then we gotta consider the cost. CPUs and GPUs are getting more powerful, but they aren't getting cheaper in tandem. It would be hard to imagine any console that could significantly outperform the Series X or PS5 within the next year, while also managing to cost under $500, that is. And also the optics of all this. If Microsoft or Sony announces one of these things, there's gonna be a lot of people pretty upset. It's like being told, hey, that thing you just spent 3 years looking for and hundreds of dollars on, it's outdated, antiquated, old. This isn't too uncommon with high-end PC parts, but consoles are designed and marketed as an inexpensive alternative to that platform. There's a lot of reasons why new consoles shouldn't release in the next 18 months. That doesn't mean they won't, anything could happen, but yeah, I wouldn't count on it. But still, there's always rumors circulating about new boxes. So today, I just kinda wanted to talk about it, because that's what I do here. I talk about stuff. There's no guarantee of a mid-gen refresh, no rule that says it has to happen. It really wasn't until the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X that we really got a sense of what a mid-gen refresh should be. An upgraded console that runs all the same games as the original, but can run some of those games better. Now, I always felt there were two reasons these machines were made. The original consoles, the PS4 and OG Xbox One, they were kind of underpowered, even by 2013 standards. They had decent graphics processing units, sure, but everything else was what you'd find in a standard low-end PC at the time, especially those hard disk drives and the CPU. This was kinda weird because most consoles would target mid to high range PC specs at launch. Normally, this is because consoles are sold for a loss. They include higher specs than you'd expect for a $300 to $500 machine, then they subsidize this with game sales and online services, you know the drill. But in 2013, the gaming industry was in a weird place. You'd see articles of analysts believing the console industry was outdated, that smartphones and mobile gaming was gonna take over, and that any new console was a risky bet. So to minimize that risk, the PS4 was actually sold for a profit. It costs less to make, which meant lower specs. The Xbox One tried to shift away from being a box made for gaming, and I'm sure that HDMI imports and Kinect drove its price up to a point where Microsoft wasn't going to shell out for a better CPU, better RAM, or a solid state drive. Of course, we know that mobile gaming didn't end the console industry. As soon as the new consoles launched, it was very apparent that it was alive and well, and all these fears were unfounded. So now, manufacturers could produce a console that was sold for a loss and had better specs, if they wanted to. There was some other motivations as well, especially on Sony's end. When we're talking about 2015, 2016, 4K was really still quite a niche concept. There wasn't a lot of content that supported that resolution, and Sony is one of the largest manufacturers of TVs, so they had a lot of incentive to get the ball rolling. Launching a game console that promised 4K capabilities would go a long way in boosting 4K TV sales, and vice versa. Now granted, the PS4 Pro didn't actually play most games in 4K, it just upscaled them, but still, that was the main focus of the marketing campaign. On Microsoft's end, things were slightly different. The Xbox One S released the same year as the PS4 Pro, but it was mostly the same OG Xbox with a slight CPU boost. It supported 4K media, but not 4K gaming. Later, the Xbox One X would launch, a real competitor to the PS4 Pro, and it did actually play many games in 4K. So that was why those Pro consoles existed in the first place. Circumstance and timing. underpowered machines coupled with a novel new emerging TV technology. With the Series X and PS5 though, they aren't really in the same situation. In terms of specs, basic performance, they're a lot closer to an upper mid to high-end PC build of 2020. They got the good NVMe SSDs, decent CPUs, decent GPUs, they're good all around. 2 years in, they still don't feel outdated. To justify a Pro console's existence, we'd be talking about something that needs to substantially improve over those original machines, and also come with a novel new emerging TV technology. It makes sense. If the original Pro consoles were meant to cater for the 4K market, this must be for 8K, right? I probably don't need to tell you that 8K is a bit impractical. A good 8K TV, like an OLED 8K TV, it's pretty up there in price. There's almost no content that supports it, no reason most people would want one of these things. 8K is not in the same position in 2022 that 4K was in 2015. 81% of homes in America owned at least one HD TV in 2015. It was reasonable to assume that people might start upgrading to a new format. From what I can find, not even a majority of Americans own a 4K TV right now, so expecting people to suddenly embrace 8K is absurd. And even then, 8K as a resolution only really makes sense on massive television sets, and I can't see most people going out and picking up a 95-inch behemoth for the home. Now on top of all that, we'd still have to talk about rendering those 8K games. 8K gaming is a fairly new thing. You'd need like a 3090 to manage it on older titles, and this is still through upscaling. Not the same kind of upscaling the PS4 Pro did, mind you. It's AI, machine learning based, NVIDIA DLSS kind of stuff. But this requires special transistors in the GPU to manage this machine learning. While NVIDIA has been on top of this, they don't make the console GPUs, AMD does. AMD has their own upscaling stuff, and even that's coming to the current consoles, but it's software based and doesn't look nearly as good as DLSS. If there were to be a new PS5 Pro or Xbox Series X2 and they actually wanted to lean into the 8K angle, AMD would need to develop new machine learning tools and cards that support it. AMD will absolutely do this, but likely only reserved for high-end PC cards and not anything you'd find in a $500 console in 2023. I should mention, because a lot of people, myself included, would say, I don't care about 8K. And yeah, nobody cares about 8K, but it could drastically improve performance in other ways, especially if you don't care about that 8K resolution. My point is, it's the exact kind of technology that would be needed to justify a Pro console. Also, they could improve the ray tracing features, that would be nice. Now there's been one specific console I haven't mentioned yet because it makes things complicated. And no, it's not the Switch Pro. I'll save that for another video. The Xbox Series S. Now I like this box, don't get me wrong, I have one, it's fun, it's fine, it gets the job done. But it's hard to deny that it's, well, not the most ambitious machine. It's got a good CPU, very similar in performance to the Series X, it's got that fast NVMe SSD for load times, but it has significantly less memory than either of the other boxes, and worse GPU performance than even the last gen Xbox One X. It was marketed as a 1440p console, but rarely hits that target in big budget titles. It's not all bad. After all, it's way easier to scale a game down to run on lower end GPUs than low end CPUs. You can cut the texture quality, get more strict on the LODs, drop the resolution or the target frame rate, and it will still run the game. I know some developers have complained about this box, but usually it doesn't seem to be about whether the console can run a game, but the compromises made to make it run. And no, this is not because the developers are lazy, I've seen that comment a lot. It's because this thing has the GPU equivalent of a cheap PC build from years ago. Right now it's not much of an issue. Even something like the Matrix UE5 demo will at least run on a Series S. Microsoft requires that any developer that makes a Series S game ports the title to the Series S, so there's no fear of the next Gears of War simply not working on this thing. Even still, the Series S seems like the prime candidate for a mid-gen refresh, right? Something that's in between an S and X in GPU power with a slight bump in CPU clock speeds. Shove in a bit more RAM, you're good to go. It'd be a more capable box, a true 1440p machine, but then you'd have 3 different Xbox platforms, each needing their own optimizations, and 2 of these platforms would still be underpowered compared to the competition. I think it'd be a mess, to be completely honest. It hurts my head to think about a world in which we would have a Series S, Series X, Series S2, and Series X2 all releasing within a few years of each other. So yeah, that's my thoughts or rants on the Pro consoles. I wouldn't worry about anything new coming out within the next 2 years, or at least 18 months. Unless Sony decides to drop a $700 PS5 Pro, yeah, I bet that thought will keep you up all night.